Hello and welcome back to the Double One Radio Gamescast. As always, well, it's not the games; it's the Games Club, Brett. We're doing the Games Club. I was too in the I was too into the way we always do it, but it's the Games
Looped up
Club. We're
into
back.
We've broken the cycle. We've finally come back to do another games club. We both somehow multiple of us on the podcast have played the same game yet again.
Well, it's this playing the same game and also playing the same game at roughly similar times. That's always the cutoff. So this time we're going to be talking about Nier Replicant. Brett and I have played the entirety of the game all the way through all the endings available. But this Games Club is going to be structured a little bit differently. So the past ones have been fully spoiler on the table all the time. For this one, we are going to start with a non-spoilery discussion of kind of a general impressions and sort of mini review that isn't written out, where we're going to talk about the game itself and tell you if it's a game that you might want to buy without listening to the rest of this, essentially. And then after that, we will go into full spoilers, because this is 100% a game we need to talk about all the endings, and we need to spoil everything in order to do that.
There's no way we can get through it otherwise.
And as a note, there will be no spoilers for Automata here, even in the ending discussion, as Brett has not played them, so we're not going to spoil that game. Probably expect a Games Club on that too. Whenever Brett gets around to it.
At some point.
That's definitely in the cards after playing this. So with that, we're going to get started. So Brett, for people that have never played a Yoko Taro game, can you give me like one phrase that describes the overall experience? For me, it's when Yoko Taro recorded that ad for Nier Automata, where he rolls around on the floor and yells Nier Automata t-shirt, Nier Automata t-shirt, shit Square Enix. That is how to describe a Yoko Taro game. Just so everyone knows what they're getting into.
I would say, because most of them are like this, making you feel bad for things that you just do in every other game and just don't even think about.
Oddly enough,
he's
similar to Last of Us.
Oddly
enough. Another game that we have done
somehow wildly less controversial. Crazy.
I don't know. I remember the Nier Gestalt having some controversy when it came out, although most of it was about Kane.
When it first came out,
So, not related to the story.
We'll get to Kane.
We will get to Kane. Okay, so general gameplay flow of this. This is a remake, not a remaster, but it has some remaster elements to it. In this version of Nier, we were playing what was originally one of the Japanese versions. So Japan had Nier Replicant and Nier Gestalt, depending on what console you were on. America only got Gestalt, I believe, which had Papa Nier and not Brother Nier. In this game, we were playing as young Nier.
Brother
Nier. So this is a review of that version of the game, not the other versions.
Yes.
It's got a bunch of endings, and I think the important distinction with this is when people say endings, it isn't that the game is a game you have to play. Well, with Replicant, it is kind of a game you have to play 5 times, but it gets dramatically less long the more you play it.
And it's also not the kind of game where it's like, oh, I got this ending. I guess I'm satisfied with that. I can stop and go play a different game and then come back to play it later. It's like no, the story isn't done until you get all of them.
Yep, and you will know, because you'll complete the ending and be like, man, that was a little bit unsatisfying.
Yeah.
And then don't worry, you're not done yet. So that's what to go in expecting, is that you're going to end up playing through this game for a while. You might see some of the same content over and over for bits and pieces of it, but it gets dramatically less difficult and less time consuming the more you go on. Which is the first kind of major stopping beat for people. I think a lot of people hear that this game has like 5 endings and then go, oh, I don't want to play a game 5 times. That's not really a concern. I think my total playtime clocked in about like 25 hours, 30 hours for all 5, so it's not too bad.
Pull that up to see if I can check mine at some point.
Yep.
Whenever it loads.
And so yeah, the general flow of the game, this is an action game. It is not as action heavy as a spectacle fighter or something like that, but it is kind of like a God of War-esque thing, but without the progression of movesets, is kind of how I'd put it.
Mm-hmm.
Do you agree with that, Brett?
It's a very like surface level simplistic action RPG, uh like gameplay wise. There's a lot of like running from place to place, and the fighting doesn't necessarily get like your move set doesn't get more complex, but what's asked of you kind of changes depending on like the area, like the bosses that you fight and the enemies that you fight
Yes.
require slightly different things from you, especially some of the weirder
Almost more along the
bosses.
lines of like, I think a lot of younger people won't have played these, but almost classic Prince of Persia style would be my. I think the closest thing I've played to
Mm.
this is probably that, to where like you get new abilities over the course of the game, but you're not getting the gameplay doesn't dramatically change. And I think that is
Yeah,
the
yeah.
one main complaint I had about this version. Is this is where the repeating the endings comes into play, where I think a lot of people, more so than Automata, will have issues with this game and it asking you to replay content
Yeah.
because of the fact that the gameplay doesn't change nearly as much as it does in Automata on the subsequent playthroughs, or the continuing of the one playthrough. But you'll be, once you get all your abilities in this game, you're not going to be really doing anything different for the majority of
Yeah.
it. That's like the one main complaint I have. However, there's tons of breaking up of gameplay styles here. We have things like side-scrolling sections. You've got like a Castlevania-inspired little mini dungeon. Tons of cool stuff like that. So you're never going to be bored, but you will not have that progression pulling you along if you're someone
Yeah.
that needs that progression to get through a game. Yeah. So
And
Brett, why
I
don't?
read a little bit
Oh, go ahead.
before. I read a little bit about this earlier today when I was looking at some interviews, and the original version of the game was pretty much just a worse version of that. And Yoko Taro didn't
Oh
like he
yeah.
wanted to make it. He wanted to make a direct balance between what people who have only played Automata would enjoy and what people who really like the original would enjoy. So that's why it doesn't like overcomplicate things, because the original game is kind of a little bit of a clunky
It's a
clunk
mess.
fest. A little bit.
Because I did
It's like
have, so growing up, I did have a copy of Nier on our Xbox 360 way back in the day, and I could not play that game. I'm glad I didn't, because I was definitely way too young to play that
yeah,
game.
yeah.
But my dad had it, and I don't think he ever played it, but we played bits of it, and I was just like, this game is awful. Because Nier on the 360, the original version, does not control well. It's clunky. It just feels like they didn't know how to make an action game. And for the most part, that's true. Because I think Yoko Taro said in interviews that like that was their
Oh
first
yeah.
attempt at this kind of pure action formula in a way that combined all these different elements, and it just didn't work out how they were wanting it to. And this time around, they were able to get it right, which they definitely
Hmm.
did. Gameplay is very solid, with the caveat that it doesn't change super often.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
You're gonna say.
Anything else you want to add for the no spoiler discussion here?
um I think if because we're trying to do a little bit of a job of selling it. I think if you are someone who is super enthralled with the stories that people say like, oh, this game is like the best story in gaming or whatever, like from classic games to modern games. If you're one of those people, then it really doesn't matter. Clearly, for a lot of people, it didn't matter how the
Oh yeah.
gameplay was. You are going to love this game, and you should absolutely give this game a shot. And I think that they're like just the way that it starts and the way that things kind of immediately go. There are enough like threads that are really tugging at you to figure out what happens at the end of them. And I know personally for me, the way that I got into this game was we'll get into more specific discussion when we get into spoiler discussion. Um, is the music. I think then like halfway through high school, just one of the songs from the soundtrack got recommended to me on YouTube, and it's just the whole soundtrack. I think Critical on YouTube has claimed that it's the best soundtrack in all of gaming, and I'm gonna be honest with you. I Like we talked for a little bit about how the soundtracks of Ace Combat 7 and Project Wingman were really, really good. None of them even come close to, to
Yep.
either Nier soundtracks, the Automata ones, the original Nier ones, or the redone ones for this game. I think they're all like top notch, incredible. I don't know how Square Enix can have so many good composers at
Yeah, you
different
are
times in their
hard pressed to
existence.
find a Square Enix produced game that does not have a incredible composer, and this is
Yeah,
no exception to that.
even the not so good ones, like the music is so good. And I think the most important thing that we can say before we get into spoilers is that if you have not played this game and want to, turn off the stream and go away
Yeah,
because you
go
have to
play
play
it.
the game first. Any spoilers for this game will like ruin everything. And I'm totally the kind of person that like, oh, but I want to know a little bit just in case if I'm really interested, and I'll like watch like a little bit of
The
like a
only
gameplay
the
video or
only
something.
thing I'll add here, the one thing you want to keep an eye on is try to get all the weapons.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
the
that's
one like
that's all.
non-spoiler way to say it. You will at one point need to have every weapon, and it's a bit of a grind if you have to do it all at once. So
Hmm.
highly recommend just
That's good
watch out for
advice.
them while you're playing, and then get them. No spoilers, but just look out for those weapons and grab them. They're pretty obvious, and none of them are too hard to go back and get if you do miss them. But it is just a thing to keep an eye out for. All right. Yeah, I also want to add my hat in the ring for music because, man, I don't think it beats out Final Fantasy 14 for me, but this is probably like my second favorite soundtrack. Although I am kind of lumping Automata and this game together because I think if I were to directly compare them, I think I would say Automata is my favorite. But
Mm,
Replicant soundtrack is also incredible. Same composer, same music team. So
yeah,
if you like one of them, you're gonna like both of them. Highly recommend the music. Even if you don't want to play the game, go listen to the soundtrack because
it
it
will
is
make
one
you
of
want to play
those.
the game.
It's one of those soundtracks that you don't really need the context of the game to enjoy it, which is great. And yeah, the story is absolutely the selling point here for anyone who's interested in like game stories or how games can do story differently than other media. This is a really good example of that because it does things that only a game can do with like changing how you
Yeah.
play, all sorts of crazy stuff like that. All right. That means from this point onwards, okay, this point onwards, if you have not played this game and want to play it, which you should after what we just said, uh, mute the stream, go do something else, go play the game,
And then come back later.
and come back later because we're about to spoil everything.
Yeah, there's no way to go through it without parsing through as much as we possibly can. Because
Yep,
oh my god, this game is
there's
is
a
is
lot
dense.
here. Uh, the last thing I'll add for people that, especially people that played the original game and haven't played Replicant yet, so the original game didn't have the like final ending in it because of budget
Hmm.
constraints. This version does. So if you finished the original Nier Gestalt and were like, why does this not feel like it wrapped everything up nicely? There's a reason for that. They didn't have the budget, and now they do. So you'll get that ending in this game. If that's the reason that you held off on playing it, is you were like, oh, I played it before. You can see some new stuff in this one. It's not
Yeah.
exactly the same as the old game. All right, Brett. So I'm gonna let you pick what we dive into first.
Oh god.
There's a lot to talk about here. We can go through just first part one, where you're playing as Baby Nier. I don't know if there's a whole lot
I,
to say about that part.
uh, then we should get it out of the way. We should get it out of the way and
Yep.
slowly get to the more and more complex things. I think. Are we? Well, let's just go straight from the beginning, the very beginning of what you see when you start the game.
All right.
Because this is a fun fantasy action RPG in which you start in Tokyo.
Yep. Shibuya,
And,
modern Shibuya.
yep. And you hang out in the cold winter month of what, like August or something.
Yeah.
Just like middle of summer. Snow is everywhere. It's bleak. It's horrible.
Snow and white chlorination, whatever the hell from
Well,
Drakengard.
yeah,
That's a whole
from
other
from
can of
Drakengard.
worms.
That's yeah. We've spoken about this many times on the normal podcast, but this whole game takes place. I don't know. I don't. It's not like right away. It's like some
It's like
amount of
ending E of the
years.
original Dragon Guard. It's
Yeah,
some
some amount of years after the
bonkers
ending E.
stuff.
Um, yeah. So uh, Snow is pretty sick. And you're introduced to the combat by just slapping up a bunch of shades that are surrounding you and your little sister in the Kmart that you've holed up in.
And it does do one of my. I know it's an overplayed trope, but one of my favorite tropes in an RPG or an action game is when they give you all the tools at the very start to tutorialize everything, and then they take it away.
Yes,
Because I
yes,
think when done
that's
wrong, it's awful, but when done right, like this game does, it's a great feeling of progression as you go through the game.
it's super satisfying. Yeah, because it's like holding like a little piece of candy out in front of you. Like, yeah, you remember how all that felt to do all that cool stuff, but you got to earn it now.
Yep, which is definitely a nice thing in this game. I also
Yeah.
really like that they set up a lot of stuff in this little prologue section that you won't understand until like halfway through the game at the earliest.
Yeah,
And,
yeah,
and
if
even
you're
then,
really
you're not
paying
going to
attention.
fully understand it until the end of the game. At the end of the last ending of the game, which is always fun where this kind of starting scene contextualizes everything that's going on. Because as
Yeah,
soon as you're
yeah.
done beating up some shades and your little sister touches a bad book, you get told that was like 1200 something years ago.
Yeah, it's I'm on the wiki right now. It says Act 1, 1412 years later,
Yep.
which is awesome.
Yep. It's a great little way to start the game because it just puts so many questions in your mind. And then the game,
Yeah.
in most games, I would be upset when they don't address that quickly, but Nier does a good job of giving you enough other things to care about as soon as it starts that you kind of put it out of your mind until you hit some weird stuff towards the end of your first run and you're like, oh, wait a minute, that did matter.
Yeah, yeah.
It's a lot of fun. All right. Anything else to say on prologue?
Uh, Nothing really other than the song that plays is I think one of my favorites in the whole game. Like top two
Yeah.
favorite. I really love the song that plays here.
All the like
Fits me very
fight
well.
or the fight and boss fight themes are always great. Some of
Oh
the
yeah.
major highlights. Then we go into part 1, and this is the only part of the game that you cannot replay once you've gone through it. So it's important when you're in this
Yeah.
part to do whatever you want to do while you're there and while you're baby Nier, who is
Hmm.
not he's not hot yet. That's the way to put it.
He's not long yet. He doesn't get extremely long yet.
I do miss the one thing I did hate is young Nier is voiced by 9S's voice actor from Nier Automata, who is phenomenal, but he's not in a lot of stuff. I was so
Mm.
disappointed because when you go to the next ending, or not the next ending, but the next part of the game, the voice actor changes. And I was very sad
Hmm.
that we didn't keep 9S, but that's fine. This part of the game, you're restricted to your one weapon type, so you don't have a lot of options in combat aside from using that one weapon type. And then you go on this journey to get all your things sorted out with Grimoire Weiss, who is voiced by the phenomenal Liam O'Brien, who does a great job.
Voice is so good.
And you've also got Kane, who is voiced by Laura Bailey, who joins pretty early on. And then Emil,
Hmm.
who I'm blanking on his voice actor, but he's also all the voices in this game are very good as well.
Oh yeah.
That's often a thing to worry about with especially JRPGs and Japanese
Yeah.
action games tend to have mediocre English voice work. This time around, I'd highly recommend playing in English if you're a native English speaker because the
For
voice
sure,
acting
yeah.
is incredible. A great way to see that is they put out a trailer, I think, towards launch that is just Kaine swearing at Grimoire Weiss
Yep.
for like 2 minutes, and it's incredible.
Uh,
It's one of the funniest trailers to a game I've ever seen. Yeah, this first part is pretty forgettable, I want to say, because most of what happens doesn't matter until the end of it.
it's yeah, this does the we'll talk more about this later when it becomes very important and slaps you in the face with it. But this part, while not being like super crazy interesting, It does set up some things that happen after the time skip.
Because it focuses mostly on like setting up the relationships of the party members. Is the
It's
general
yeah,
focus is just making sure
it
you
does.
know what these characters all think of each other and what their deals are.
Yeah, it does that, and it does a very good job at kind of setting the expectation that will later be broken. I think is it
Yeah,
does a really good job of just making it seem like this is, oh, okay, well, that was weird. I guess this is just a normal game now. Huh, that's what with some fun little, oh, sometimes the camera angle changes depending on what the, oh, this area is all black and white. I guess that's fun.
that's a good point
This
because
is
the first part plays a lot more like a traditional Western RPG where you
mhm.
have like your standard story, nothing crazy is happening. You got to go kill these evil shades. There's not a lot of moral gray zone here. They tend to paint everything in black and white, and then they get through it, and you're like, oh, it didn't work so well.
Yeah, we'll get to that. Because I do think that the things that the thing that I what's the place that has all the rules or whatever? Because you go
Facade.
there. Yeah, yeah, so you go there in this beginning part, don't you? God, it's
Yeah,
been like
you
a few
do.
months
You
since I
do.
played.
Not for
And you do only
particularly
go through
long,
this.
but you do.
Yeah. Um, but that's I thought that was a pretty effective part of the time skip, just seeing like, oh, this guy is the uh prince now or whatever, and this random mute girl or whatever becomes this character. That sort of time skip stuff was really effective, and I think it would have been weird if it wasn't there for those. But yeah, other than that, and the setting up that this is supposedly a normal game, uh, and nothing too incredible happens until the end of the beginning part.
All right, now I think it's time to talk about that ending, the beginning part.
Yeah.
We don't have a lot
Hmm.
more to add to this. This is definitely the part where there's the least really going on to kind of
And I,
make it unique for a Yoko Taro game. It's a lot like Nier's first run through, Nier Automata's first run through, where the most of the first part is kind of setting up the world and the characters and not really progressing the story to an insane degree. But there's still a lot going on. It's
yeah,
definitely a fun bit, but I think they knew that this is the part that you can't make people play twice because
exactly. Yeah.
you don't have as much engaging gameplay going on. Things are a lot more spread out here. You don't have the travel options you get later in the game, so you definitely
Yeah.
have to be a little bit more lax with this. And then we get the ending where it's the heroes can't beat the evil monster. They
No,
can't
they
do it.
can't. And the whole, like, a lot of people get killed in the
Uh
little
huh.
village that they're in because it just crawls over everything and just destroys everything. And your little silly group of friends is really the only group of people in the entire world, I guess, that can really like stand up to the shades at all. And definitely been shown that it is like that to this point because of all the things that people are asking you to do for them. But really, just like it's just a completely hopeless situation, and they push you back into the library that you've been sent to a few times before. Um, and there's a boss fight in there against the thing, and you quote unquote win in the boss fight, but you don't win in the game because someone's gotta keep the thing in the basement, and Kaine is holding that door closed as best as she can, but it's really fighting back, and Emil has a wonderful little power to just turn anything that he looks at to stone. So they thought it was a really good idea to just turn Kaine to stone and stop the monster from getting out. And this is the first time really in the game where it's like, oh man, that music swelling and this is happening right now. This is not. This is really sad.
Yeah, it's not playing
Why they just go
around.
just. This is supposed to go. It'll pop back out of the door and then kind of get stuck down. And this is time for the second phase, right? No. And as if that wasn't bad enough, something even worse happens.
Yep. So The whole setup for this is that you're trying to find a cure for Yona, who's your little sister's. She's got an incurable illness called the Black Scrawl, and she is progressively getting worse, and you're trying to find some kind of cure or some kind of way to prevent her death, is what is heavily alluded to. And this whole time you're like, she's getting progressively worse in this small time span. There's no time skips in this first part. You're like, I think 13, 14-year-old Nier running around trying to solve problems and just make your sister happy. And then all of a sudden, your sister gets yoinked and kidnapped by the Shadow Lord.
Who's like this super like metal-looking, like black energy guy with like fairy wings, and
he looks like he belongs on the cover of a metal band album.
Yeah, totally.
Could definitely see that. And he yoinks your little sister. He also has... So you also have Grimoire Weiss this entire time, who is your kind of ever-present companion and snarky book that is by your side. And Shadow Lord also has a snarky book by his side. But it's, of course, called Grimoire Noir.
Of course.
White and black.
It's even snarkier.
It's even snarkier and sounds evil all the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I think this is what I really like about this first part as a whole, is this is the one where you're not really asked to question what you're doing very much.
Yeah.
Which is a thing that every Yoko Taro game likes to do this, where they make you question the morality of the things that you're doing. And like, is it good that you're murdering all these shades? Because to you, they are unthinking things, right?
They're just evil, yeah.
And at the start, this is mostly true, because, like, of course, you learn later on, and this is where we're getting into heavy, serious spoilers, so legitimately get out if you're not.
Yes, you funny guys that decided to stay a little bit later, thinking that you'd find out something cool.
But we have to talk about information from like the last few endings to contextualize some of this, so it's gonna happen now. One of the big things that's revealed later on is that the shades are humans.
Yes.
Right. The shades are actual humans who are trapped in this form, waiting for their bodies to be cured from this disease that was incurable, which hasn't happened yet. So the shades are waiting around, but most of them have gone insane, is the thing. So
because it's been a really long time. It's been
a really long time.
12 years.
And there's been a lot. There was a failure in this project that was trying to do it. We'll get into that later, but the gist of it is you learn that you're killing humans. And for most of the second part of the game and the subsequent endings, that is like really sad all the time. But even in the case of this first part, this is the one where it eases you in, because there's not really a question of if these shades are insane or not, unlike the other ones, because these are the ones that are just murdering mass amounts of people that didn't attack them.
Yeah.
So I do like that this one has a very different feel from the rest of the game, in that most of what you're doing is morally nice, which kind of eases you into what's going to happen later on.
Mm-hmm. For the big ol' switcheroo.
Okay, so of course, Kane gets sealed off into this granite wall, and look, I know there's going to be people that are like, why didn't they just put a book in front of the door and use Emil's eyes on that? Because it's not fun.
No, not even because it's not fun. Exactly, because it's not suffering enough. Because Yoko Taro didn't go like, yes, this will make people want to die.
And that's like the one criticism I have of Nier Replicant over Nier Automata, is I think this is what you're going to really enjoy going through Automata, Brett, is Automata does a much better job at making characters feel like they hit their character beats more naturally. Whereas Replicant kind of has this problem where sometimes a major character plot point or beat that will happen, part of the main character arc, just kind of gets introduced and happens in the same scene. Especially with Emil. It happens with Emil a lot, where like he'll suddenly, you don't learn that he's really struggling with his like vision powers and in using them as a thing until he's forced to do this. Which I think could have used a bit more setup and whatnot. Definitely that's budgetary, because you don't have infinite time with a game like this. And this game is already long for the gameplay, so...
If anything, more of that comes after this happens, so you don't have that as like build up to it. You have like kind of more of an understanding afterward, which is, it's still there, but it's definitely less powerful if he had like if they somehow were able to rewrite it so that he had more time to feel really, really worried or scared about his powers or something, and then had to do this, then that would have been even more heartbreaking. But
yeah, because I think the main thing is that it does turn this one scene at the end of part 1 into, for me, there were bits in the scene that almost felt comedic and not as heavy hitting as they should, just because of the framing and how quickly things were introduced. It really felt a little bit disjointed in this one scene. Like, I'm not criticizing the rest of the part for this, and I'm certainly not criticizing the rest of the game for this, because I think it gets solved later on. But for this scene, which is your first major Yoko Taro story beat, I think it's a little bit not disheartening, but it might hit a lot of people that aren't more familiar with Yoko Taro or Japanese games in general in a different way.
Yeah, this is one of those scenes where Wyatt would be like, well, Wyatt, this doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, I think that's the risk here. Of course, all of this gets explained later on. Anything else about part 1 you want to talk about, Brett?
No, I think that really is just another thing that, like, a small thing that I'm kind of thinking about noticing now, is that they really do like this, and we'll get to this one because I have a feeling we're going to end up talking about characters specifically later on when we get more towards the end. This part and the whole game just does a really good job of making sure you know how much the protagonist loves and just wants his sister to be okay. Like this poor kid,
Yes.
when he realizes that she like ran out to like try to figure it out herself or something, he just instant panic mode, and his voice acting does a really good job as just like,
and so does
just making you
Yona's
feel
VA.
super bad.
Yona's VA also does an incredible job, and I think one really important point for why this works so well is the loading screens. All the loading screens in this game, aside from a select few, are handwritten notes from Yona to your main character, Nier, and they all kind of describe like little. They're not important. They just describe little things like, oh, I brought him a flower today and he was happy, or oh, I didn't see him today and I was sad. And it's that kind of thing that's like, this is such a wonderful way to characterize a character that we don't get to spend a lot of time with.
Yeah,
over the course of the whole game.
I think there was one where it was like, oh, today, it was my birthday, so we did this. I wonder when his birthday is because he never talks about it. And it's just like, this guy cares so much about his poor little sister that they don't even celebrate his birthday because he's so focused on protecting her and the town.
Yep.
There's so many little ones that are like that where if you think about it after just reading, it's like, oh, that's cute. Oh, wait, this guy is like really. Jeez.
Yes, that's a lot of the things in this kind of hit you slowly over time.
Yeah.
And it's definitely, those loading screens are great. They're a really good way to kind of encapsulate how these two characters feel about each other, which is always hard to do in a game like this where you have a character that isn't in the main party but is a major player in the entire story.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a great way to just to like remind the player what they're doing. It's because even if I was like lost or forgot what my objective was, when I saw a loading screen, I'd be like, okay, got to get on the main story because we got to save Yona. We got to do it.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
and I was
another
with
thing that only
Nier with that.
Yeah. Only a game can do that. Movies don't have loading screens, or they shouldn't. when they start to, I think we might have reached a little bit of a problem, but that's neither here nor there. So if that's it for Act 1, then
yeah, I think we'll talk about all the Emil stuff at once because that's a whole lot.
Yeah,
as a spicy meatball, as it were. So we'll contain that to its own thing.
Mm-hmm.
All right, you want to introduce our first ending, our first part, skip, Brett?
Yeah, so 5 years pass. The protagonist is, as you said, hot now, Ryan. He's very long. His design is awesome. I love his design so much. I do like Dad Nier a lot, but there's so many parts of Brother Nier's design when he gets older. That's just like his like arms are covered in like a weird like grandma rug, but they're black and there's like fluff at the end, so it's like goth or something.
Yes.
It's so unique and weird, and I love it.
It's a good look.
So yeah, it is. Yeah,
And
no other character looks
this is
like
where
that.
one of my criticisms of the marketing campaign for this game is.
Mhm.
Because they didn't do it in trailers, but the box art for the game has
Oh,
aged up Brother Nier and
instead of
Emil in his different body.
yeah, that is something I wish that they didn't have in the market. I'm not as mad about the grown up Brother Nier part because I had a if I had a feeling like there's a dad version of the game or whatever. Like, yeah, he's gonna get older, so he can
Yeah.
take care of his little sister or whatever. But like, I didn't know Emil would end up looking like that, and I wish that they just like I know that's the Yoko Taro mask, but like, don't put it on the
Because I
front.
think legitimately the reason Emil's on that cover with that form is because Yoko Taro identifies with that head so much in
I
marketing and
guess,
whatnot.
yeah.
And I think they were like, oh, this will sell the game so people know it's Yoko Taro. Which they're right, but I really think they could have just put the head there
It's yeah.
and
They
not
honestly,
contextualize it as a party member.
it's yeah. Just have the cover of the game just be the Emil head in the middle and just like on a black background or something. That would be enough.
Yeah, definitely. All right, back to the actual part 2.
Yes. Uh, all this time, through all those 5 years, and you know that they're doing it because Brother Nier, when he cares about something, he really cares about something. They've been trying to figure out a way how to undo Kaine's
And they've
petrification
also
because
still been trying to find leads on the Shadow Lord, and they set up very early that they were completely unsuccessful for
yeah,
5 years. They
ugh,
do a good job of making you feel like everyone else thinks Yona's dead. And
yeah.
they're all like, oh, you just won't let this go. And I think that's
Hmm.
a good starting point, is that 5 year time skip really hits you hard because of that.
Yeah, for sure.
Where you go, oh man, like everyone, and even the player at this point, probably thinks Yona's dead.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of playing on that emotion and making it be like, okay, where's this gonna go? I think that's
And I
great.
think if I remember correctly, I think one of the characters that like specifically say that like you haven't gotten over this yet are Devola and Popola, which
Yes.
were the twins that were like, yeah, let's help out, save your little sister, and just to see them all of a sudden be like, dude, come on, just get over it, man. It's
Well, what
been
I love
five
about
years.
how
It's
they
really
do it
like, ugh.
specifically is they don't directly say, "Are you over this?" They like do the thing where you can hear the VAs do the kind of voice wobble and the
Yeah,
"Are you sure this is going to end well?" kind of thing. And when, especially with what you know later, this is really really hard hitting, especially on subsequent playthroughs.
it's so good because this is when you'd start on almost every other ending, as you start at the beginning of the second half.
Yeah, so it is a
Um,
good transfer of what's going on. This new
yeah.
normal. And you quickly learn you have 2 new weapons as well, which are fun. You get your big old Hungan great swords and then your spears,
Hell yeah.
as well as your one-handed weapons that you had before. So, man, I love that spear
Uh,
moveset.
oh, dude, I was about to say which one you stuck with because I stuck with spears almost the whole time.
Oh yeah, no, I'm the kind of person that always tries to play a dragoon in Final
Oh, of
Fantasy games.
course.
So, of course, I'm gonna stick with a spear. I'm a huge fan of any spear, especially when you get spears that stab and twirl. It's so
Yeah.
it doesn't look at all regular. Like, this is not a normal combat style. It's the kind of thing where someone on YouTube would watch this and be like, these moves are all impossible. And I'm like, I don't
Oh
care.
yeah, like oh, actually.
It's completely pointless that he spins the weapon 6 times. I'm like, no, I love it. So,
It's cool. I don't care. I don't care if time doesn't stop in real life when I slice the bad guy in half in
and
front of
it
me.
does,
When it does that for a frame in the game, it's cool.
yes, it does such a great job of establishing that Nier has not been, uh, like waiting around during these 5 years. He has been like
Oh yeah.
getting swole.
Yeah.
He has leveled up.
He's become a true gamer after all this time.
Yeah, which is definitely a nice starting point. then they go through this whole bit where first you go through and you get the Emil second dungeon, where you try to find a way to undo Kaine's petrification. And this is the whole bit where like Emil eventually gets his new body, and there's a whole awful backstory with him and Halua, who is his like a not actual sister, I think. Was she his real sister? Essentially, their family relationship is brother and sister, even if they aren't blood.
And they're both test subjects, and they're referred to that as such, as you'd find with all the fun little like notes and stuff that you pick up.
They're number 7 and number 6.
Yeah, number 6 and 7. Which I gotta say, I love the little notes that you pick up in the inventory. I like just little stuff like that. Almost makes it feel like an RP or an ARG, because it's not like, oh, they're written in the Nier font and they come up in the Nier press. It's like, no, they come up on little like ripped pieces of paper with like mysterious
faded
black and white photos on them.
It's great.
Yeah.
And
it's super awesome presentation.
I love that they make you work to put together what actually happened.
Yes.
This isn't a game that will hand you the answers to things, but the answers are there if you look for them. And it always makes sure you have the tools to find those answers. And this is kind of that lead up to where you eventually learn that the Shades are humans. You can kind of put a lot of that together here especially if you've played Automata. Then you can kind of follow Yoko Taro's line of thought to be like, okay, this is going to be the thing.
What's the worst possible outcome?
Yeah, what is the worst thing that could happen here in this underground laboratory? Yeah. So that's a big kind of realization where you're like, huh, and you start to think more about what's going on. And you have to fight Halua, which is an awful boss fight. It's a great boss fight.
Sad.
But it's so sad because you have this context the entire time of Emil. For a little while, you might think he's completely dead because he just dives into her mouth. There's a reason for it. It's not just like he dives into his mouth, but it is kind of... If you go back and do this again, it's kind of funny. So...
Yeah, there are a lot of things in this game, like especially in that first cutscene where you brought it up, like it just like watching it without the music playing or something,
and without
context, how
just
completely absurd. Yeah, it's just totally absurd. Like this is totally like it would totally be the kind of thing where if not for the absolute Yoko Taroism of it all, it would fall apart. But the fact that it's presented and displayed in such a way, and the fact that the music is like that, and the fact that all the previous context is like that, with all that in mind, the weird, absurd crap that happens on the screen is just it's impossible. After this point on, it is very difficult to not take it completely seriously.
Yeah, it definitely does a great job of making you believe in this kind of fiction that they've built.
Yeah.
Which is a rare skill for any game developer, where you have to get people to like really buy into what's going on, especially the zanier you get. So I think it's one of Yoko Taro's main skills is getting people to really buy into this setting and these characters in a way that makes you really attached to them and willing to put yourself through all this suffering.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's the important note here is none of this is going to end well. For a while.
No.
even the final ending doesn't end particularly well.
No.
Yep. So yeah, they get through this and figure out eventually that Emil has more control over his powers and also looks like a monster and can now free Kaine by going back. And of course they have the story beat of Kaine doesn't care that Emil isn't normal anymore, and she recognizes him immediately regardless, which plays more into her story that they go into later.
Yes.
Which is like this important. Is the densest bit of story in this game, I think, of like this segment, especially coming back to it after subsequent playthroughs, because when the game restarts you after each ending, you don't go through that Emil dungeon more than one time. You only do that once, and then you restart at Kaine being freed every time, so you have your full party. Which means you really gotta soak it in while you have the time, the chance.
Yeah.
Which is I think that's definitely my favorite part of the game, is that little breadcrumb trail of finding Halua and then learning this bit of information that starts to lead you in the right direction.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
All right, then we go, and after Kane's freed and they have their emotional reunion, we get the whole, you got to go get the 5 MacGuffins to gain access to the MacGuffin castle.
The second time there was a MacGuffin quest. The first MacGuffin quest was in part 1, and they kind of just put you like halfway through every dungeon or something. You just go like visit them. This time they put you all the way through the dungeons, which it really is like just it's kind of a miracle. How I know our opinions differ slightly on this, but it's kind of a miracle how it didn't become completely boring after doing this once.
Yeah. So the only one to me that got completely boring was the Lost Shrine, because you go through it so many more times than the other ones.
Yeah, that makes sense.
You have to go there for a bunch of side quests to get weapons. You have to go there for the main story twice every run through. And then you also have to go there in the final ending and whatnot, or the pre-final ending, the second to final ending.
Yeah.
So there's all this redoing of that one final segment, especially because you can't save midway through that. So that like last bit, I think, wore on me after the second time. Like I got through it fine 2 times, and then the third time and the fourth time were like, okay. This is a little bit much because nothing changed. That's the big problem with that bit. Is nothing in that bit changes, whereas most of the other ones, you have more lore, more information, and you only really get that once with the Lost Shrine. So,
yeah,
that was the main sticking point I had. But it's not, by no means is it bad enough that you can't get through it.
Yeah, for sure. Because it's not very long either. The Lost Shrine is like the shortest out of all of them, I'm pretty sure.
It's
until you get to like the second part of it. But
yep. Yeah, that's this whole MacGuffin quest. I think we'll kind of speed through, but you go on, you get your 5 pieces of heart, essentially, your 5 pieces of the Triforce, and then you use them to open the key to the big bad Ganon Castle, and then you learn, Ganon Castle's not what you thought it was.
It's a Japanese office building. Wow. With a nice garden on the roof.
You have to answer a bird's questions.
Yeah.
The bird asks you about humanity and what they do, and that's when you kind of have to have connected the dots of, okay, the characters, the humans are the shades. The quote-unquote humans are fake people.
Yeah, that was the really big thing for me, is that, okay, I can stomach the fact that like, the herder, the things that you've been killing maybe weren't so bad all along, but the fact that every single character that you have spoken to the entire game up until now, including you and your sister, are not real people. You are not real.
You see, and this is, of course, this is where Yoko Taro gets you, because then you're like, well, does it matter? Right?
Exactly. It's like, normally it's just like, oh, well, I guess we're not human then. Why should I even care anymore? But it's just insane. I don't even understand. Like, as someone who writes things, I don't even understand how this man could have pulled it off. This is like... it's insanity.
Well, because the insanity is he pulls it off in every game he makes. He has something similar to this in every single Drakengard game, and it's the same thing where it's just as emotionally affecting, because you're like, well, there's no good answer here, right? You're not left with a black and white. You're left with, well, the humans are the shades, which we have been brutally murdering, but conversely, many of them were trying to brutally murder us. Right?
Yeah.
So you feel bad, but at the same time, it's like no one ever makes an effort to communicate.
Yep.
Which I think is...
In fact...
Yeah, go ahead.
You go. No, because I was going to segue into the next part.
Oh, you're going to segue. All right. Go. Yeah, the one... This is my one other major story complaint with Replicant over Automata, is Replicant does not do a great job of showing the different viewpoints in a way that makes a ton of sense. Because it's constantly shown that like these characters are human on both sides, right? Relatively human psyche-wise. They all have emotions and feelings. Except you see how the shades the entire time are just kind of this like twisted form of humanity. Except for some of them, where like some of them are just fine, but their first reaction is always kill people, and then it's also the same problem on the player side because I think Nier is a little bit murder hobo-y.
A little bit.
Because he has a few lines where he'll go like, "I need to kill all the shades."
Mm-hmm.
And it's like the camera will zoom in on his face and make him look all evil for a second. I'll be like, well, have we ever... We never really come back to that. Even in the end of the game, we never come back to that point, which is, I think, the one thing that's kind of missing is Nier having some kind of realization.
Yeah, he doesn't.
Because it feels like every other character has realizations.
Yeah.
Because it's Kane knows at the end, and then Emil always kind of feels like he knows, but Nier himself is just kind of like, well, here I go killing again.
Yeah.
Which just feels like there could have been a bit more contextualization to that, or I think doing a better job of just making it a little bit more gray as to what the player is doing. Because you don't have an option in any of these fights to not kill someone, and you don't need it, because the story relies on it, right? You have to kill all these people. But there's bits of it where you're like, I really wish, especially with, like, I think it's P33 and Little Khalil, the Shade.
Yeah.
Is the one where that felt like it needed a tiny bit more contextualization to the murdering going on. Because, like, that entire questline revolves around, like, 3 different characters being murder hobos the whole time, which gets a little bit rote after the like 3rd time going through it, because you have to go through that thing like 4 times.
Yeah.
Which is rough. So yeah, that's the main kind of rough point for me. But aside from that, I think this segment at the end of the Shadow Lord's Castle works really well. The whole bull seeming unstoppable at the end is a really good kind of boss fight, because it's not hard.
Yeah.
But it does make you realize, okay, this isn't just a problem we can solve. And then when you see the other characters come in and try to save you, and you get that whole bit of, oh, they're going to sacrifice themselves for me, but the whole point of me doing things for them was so that they would learn to not sacrifice themselves.
Yep.
I think that's such a great story beat, where it's like, you don't have to always have a story that has a good ending to be a good story. I think that's an important point that a lot of people that play video games don't often see, because most games have happy endings all the time, which is not a bad thing, but it's like the point of Mass Effect, where a Renegade run in Mass Effect is just kind of cartoonishly evil, but they could have done it in a way that isn't that, and they kind of figured that out in the 3rd game. But if you actually leave leeway for that kind of story that involves a lot of sacrifice and making your way to the end and having things that don't turn out super well, or more characters involved that are morally gray, you end up with a more interesting final product than your average RPG or something.
Yeah. And I think it's important to say that it's not any... If anything, it's more satisfying than a story that just ends happily, just because of the fact that it's something different and handled well. I think there's definitely a trap that you... If Yoko Taro was less of a good writer-director person, then I could easily see something like this falling apart in just the fact that it's not a satisfying like way to end a game, because it's nothing maybe not nothing, but very few good things happen, and I mean, even in the original one, even fewer good things happen because it didn't have ending E. Just the way that all of the small and more important side quests and all the small character things, the way that they build up to the bad things happening, like that, like you get it now, yep, like that is just that's all the satisfaction that you need playing this. It's the same kind of thing as just like, oh, I finally finished and I saved the kingdom or whatever. It's the complete opposite of that, but it does the same thing in even better of a way, in my opinion.
You see, this is where the main party members get even better, because with Nier, he's always this goal-focused protagonist. He's not about the journey, he's about the destination. But with Kane and Emil, you get a very different feeling from them, where they're kind of just happy to have been here, right? Like, they don't really care about if they succeed. What they care about is they're fighting for something they believe in. Yeah, and that's a really, really interesting feeling at the end of the game, where the end of the first ending of the game, The second ending,
yeah,
where you know things aren't going to end super well for them, but you know that they don't really care. And I think that's a very unique place to be in with characters, where it's often hard to portray that attitude in a way that doesn't feel just kind of written in, whereas here it feels very natural.
For sure, yeah.
All right, so you want to hit the ending, Brett? Our first.
I want to hit the thing before the ending.
Okay.
That this was the first that I knew. I after a little bit towards the end of the segment, I knew it was going to happen, but it still didn't make it any easier to stomach. You get to a certain point in the Shadowlord's castle, and the very people that told you to both go and not go there are there. It's Devila and Popola there, and they reveal that they never cared at all and were trying to keep you away because you're a horrible, horrible monster that's killing all the people that are left, even if they went insane. And then sad MLG remix of their song plays as you kill them too, and it's horrible. And
it's horrible, but also great.
Oh yeah, horrible emotionally. And it's just, oh my god, that whole segment of fighting them, like after all the things that happened literally right before it, of all the constant slaps in the face, this is just like it's such a gut punch. And then you look down, and the fist that just punched you in the gut, you realize it had a knife in it, because now Emil is dead, because now he had to save you from whichever Popola is left.
It's the one that gets him.
Yeah, is doing the big explode and kill everybody attack, and of course your only magic boy Emil saves you at the cost of his own life. And it's just really like, is this run through the one where they just like show him like shrinking into like a black void? Like,
yeah,
they don't
so
even
that happens in
like...
every one. Every ending they do that, where Emil like starts crying in a ball afterwards, and you see the screen cracking to represent that he's getting crushed. And then it just does this implosion, and you see his staff fall to the ground with nothing else.
It's the worst and simultaneously the best, because like the first time going through like that's what I mean. Like, I knew that, okay, someone's gonna have to save us. It's gonna be Emil, but it didn't even matter, because the song that they play and the way that they show it is, it's not like, oh, he's being eviscerated. It's just like they do it in such a more like tasteful. They like hold back almost, just like, yeah.
The music is wonderful. It's gone. Like, this is one of the few times where the music kind of calms down a little bit and just becomes very mournful. Of like, really, you know he's going to die at this point. You know what's happening.
Yeah.
And the thing I love about what Emil does here is he's presents himself as very strong in front of Kane and Nier, but then as soon as he's alone in that thing, he kind of breaks down and is like, I don't want to die. And that's always the thing that gets me, is when a character can be like, I don't want to die, and it actually matters. Because here, you feel it. You've kind of been with this character who is a child, right? He's not even old compared to most of these people, right? Well, technically, they're all very old.
Yeah, but like mentally,
he's a child.
Yeah.
Which is just hard to go through at that ending bit.
Yeah.
It's a great scene.
This is the first. I don't know if you had a cry counter going, Ryan, but this is the first. This is the first time that I cried while playing.
I think for me, I don't. The first bit where I really had it was when Popola stops and goes, "You want to stop?" That's the bit that hit me, where she really starts going off about how, like, Nier at one point is like, after he kills Devila, he's like, we should just stop fighting. And she's like, what's the point?
Exactly. You just killed my other half, and you killed all these other people, and you're literally right at the end of the quote-unquote game. Now you decide that it's enough? And her delivery, oh my god.
It's so
You're
good.
right.
I think that moment to me is like the moment this game, the story really kind of elevated itself to that unique level that very few developers can reach, where they kind of managed to create that one scene in a game that really makes you go, there's no good ending here, but I love it because it's so well written and it's so well done that you can't help but love the suffering.
Yeah.
which is such a hard thing to do because like there are games that feel oppressive, which I think if you go back and watch our Last of Us Part 2 Games Club, I don't think Wyatt necessarily felt the same way, but that's how I mostly felt about Last of Us Part 2, is the game is just too oppressive the entire time, where you never have the moments of breathing and being in these goofy little bits of like Kane and Emil joking together, which makes when things happen to them hurt so much more and feel so much more rewarding because you have that context of them being normal. I think that's a great thing that Nier does as a game. Sure. Yeah, I definitely think that was the moment that really got me. And this is also the point where Devil and Popola spell out that you are not human if you haven't gotten it by now.
Yeah.
I think by this point, most people would have gotten it, but this is where you get it spelled out if you haven't.
Yeah. And I think there is an important disconnect. Like at this point also, like if you figured it out beforehand, clearly Nier has not. And even after they tell him, it's almost like he doesn't even care. Because like after that, he's just like, okay, we're at the Shadow Lord. I have to get my sister back.
Because that's also the question on if the player cares. Because like from your perspective, the player perspective, you've seen all of Nier's story, and that clearly he and Yona care for each other in a way that is human. So you hit this point, and he's like, "What does it matter?" And for the most part, kind of agree with him because I'm like, at this point, you've gone through so much that you're your own person. Which is a really unique way of handling this. All right, then we get our first big boss fight with the Shadow Lord. It's kind of a culmination of everything you've done before. Lots of cinematic fight bits. You learn at the very start that Yona is being possessed by Yona.
Yes, by herself.
Then Yona sacrifices herself to save Yona. And then, of course, Shadow Lord is revealed to be Nier.
Yes.
The OG Nier that you played as way back when in the prologue.
Yep.
That's him. And he is what's called... This is where the game gets a little bit esoteric, and we'll probably talk more about this, like, the whole Gestalt project whenever we talk about Automata, because it's kind of its own thing. You do learn more about in Automata as kind of like, you'll find bits of lore about the original Nier in that game that kind of explains some things. But you learn that he is like the original, and the whole thing that will happen is once you kill him, all the shades are going to die.
Which means all the actual humans that, like all the people around you now, technically, that you know and have had like lives and families and that sort of thing.
Yep.
Gone.
Everyone gone die. And there's also a whole bunch of things where later on all the replicants is what you are. That's why it's called Nier Replicant, because you're a replicant. Are also going to die out.
Yes.
Which we don't see, but you learn that that's kind of the inevitable ending of this, is that the replicants can't really survive forever without the shades. So it's a nasty spiral.
It's a Yoko Taro, isn't it?
They also
it only gets worse.
One of the pretty easily missable things here is they do explain what the Black Scrawl is, and it's like the joining and failed joining of the shade to their human body, to where the Black Scrawl represents that the shades are going insane, or the shade of that human is going insane, and then once it's complete, the shade can never join the human again, and they are essentially the wild shades that you have to kill and fight constantly. So that's kind of what you learn about that. It sets up a lot of sad, oh no, I've killed like 1,000 people. Because I ground them for their textbooks.
Oh, it's awesome. That's another thing I forgot. All of the shades, like they drop like little like toys or little like office supplies or like school supplies and stuff. And like even if you like for a while, it's like that's just gonna happen, and you're gonna look at your inventory at all these useless things that you've got and just be like, what? Why are they dropping this? It doesn't make any sense. It's because they're people. It's because they were all people.
Yep. They all have their belongings that they cared about. So, yep, that's the big. That's kind of the entirety of the first ending. All right.
Mm-hmm.
So we're gonna speed up to the second ending, Second ending, things are mostly the same with one major exception. You now get to learn a lot more about Kane.
Mm-hmm.
So you start with a little text adventure that describes Kane's past, which is heartbreaking.
It's like,
this was the second thing that got me, bro.
This one got close to getting me. I was definitely totally wrapped up in the feels by this, but if this can lead into just like a segue about just Kane in general,
this is because we don't need to talk about the story again because it's the same for this run through. But we got a whole lot to talk about with Kane.
The only other thing is that now in cutscenes that have shades in them, you get subtitles for what they're saying, and they're all very sad because now you know that they're people and they have things to say. But yeah, we already talked about that sort of thing. Kane is like at first the only thing that I like thought about her or whatever is because I have a pretty high fan service tolerance.
Yeah,
but you know, I it's impossible to look at Kane's character and at least be like, okay, like my mom or someone would probably think that like that's a little weird that they're making the character just literally wear just lingerie out and she's like fighting and stuff and she constantly says the bad words all the time. Even Vice calls her hussy all the time and makes fun of her for dressing like that. And you know, there are times when I like the reason that I get past the fan service is because it's written in. Like, oh, this character is like super proud of themselves or whatever, so like this is why they want to show off their body or something. Like, oh, they just went through this, so that's why they're wearing this or something. Or maybe they don't like it, so they're trying to get away from it or something like that. No fan service excuse is even on the same like Kane's fan service excuse, if we're really going to dumb it down to that, is a Mount Everest above every other.
You know when like Kojima says that the whole reason Quiet is wearing a bikini is because she breathes through her skin. That's the scale of that's a stupid excuse. This is the scale of like, oh god.
Yeah, this is the scale of this character cannot be any other way. This character cannot wear.
I don't know if you know the story behind her character design, Brett. Have you heard it anywhere?
What do you mean?
So apparently, Yoko Taro's original design for Kane was nothing like this.
You mean the real life one?
Yeah. Her character was the exact same concept of like she has the same story beats, the same grandmother thing, the same like concern about her own body, but he had talked to his character designer and was like, okay, we need a design for this character, and he was completely surprised when he got back this like super hyper sexualized like character art, and he was like, this is a super interesting direction to take this character in.
Interesting.
So originally the plan was not for this to be the way that she presents herself, and I'm very glad they went with that character artist thing because it hits so hard when you learn, especially because the game never directly tells you why she dresses like this, but it makes it very clear if you have like a basic reading comprehension level.
Pretty much, yeah.
You can pick up on what's going on very quickly, and the main thing is we learn that Kane is intersex. So she was born with, we don't know like what details, but either both genitalia or not the right one for what she wishes she had, and that's why a bunch of kids in her hometown beat her up all the time.
It's not even like make fun of her. They're like beating her with like rocks and stuff.
Yeah, like, it's like
genuinely like beating her to a pulp.
Awful. And they do a really good job of humanizing her and showing exactly why like she feels she never questioned herself, but she questioned everyone else for questioning her, kind of, is where they kind of take it. And that she presents herself that way to make sure people understand and like get it that she's a woman. So I think it's such an interesting character. And when I think of like when Nier originally came out, I have a feeling that's a lot of why it's so subtle with what actually is going on here, and they don't directly tell you. Is because this game came out, let me find the year, but it was definitely still in the time when games were not often very accepting.
Yeah, for
of
sure.
different people.
Like society in general,
Yeah,
like just
2010.
entertainment society in general. Yeah, 2010. If you told me that someone was gonna have a very like super like beyond tasteful and well written character progression about someone who is in just such a just strange, unusual situation as Kaine and her body are in, like I wouldn't believe you. But that's the thing, is that like nothing of that was changed.
And it
It was just
also,
always that well written.
what I love so much about this is they don't reveal this to you until you have already played the game for like 15 to 20 hours. So you're already
Yes.
super attached to Kaine as a character.
Mm-hmm.
And then they reveal this and you go, "Oh god."
Mm-hmm.
And I have to
To the
wonder,
point
like,
where like
if there were people that read this and might have had their minds changed about things because of this. Because at that point, you're super attached to this character and like, "Oh no, what if I'm thinking what those kids are thinking? This is awful."
it's yeah, exactly. If just this fact about her body makes me change my opinion about her, am I just as bad as the people that were beating her with a rock?
And that's like one of such
Basically.
of the unique things that games can do. This is like my
Yeah.
favorite starting point of one of these arcs is this whole Kaine bit at the beginning where you learn about her past. It's so good at getting you involved in her character arc and really caring.
Mm-hmm.
Then comes the immediate disappointment that you're not playing as Kaine.
I know, I know, I know.
So the setup for this second ending route is that the game tells you the game's not over. Go back and see Kaine's half of the story, and they kind of do a fake out where you think maybe, and then they're like nah, and you don't play as Kaine.
Yeah.
Which is a shame because this is the main thing that I think makes Nier Automata so much easier to play through, is that every time you hit an ending, you have a much different experience waiting
Yeah,
on the
that's
other
what
side. Even if you're playing the same content, you have a very different set of abilities and whatnot. So here, where you have just this, oh, we're focusing on Kaine, but the entire time I'm playing as Nier, and it's just like I wish they had maybe fleshed out the ending E stuff a little bit more and like given her an actual arc route here.
Yeah.
Because I think it would have done wonders to keep people who don't have like the patience to finish this game playing it all the way to the end. So yeah.
And I think that's like they kind of wrote themselves, they like designed themselves into a corner a little bit, because you can imagine the original reason that they didn't want to make like a whole different playable character for his section is that's like a lot of extra, like now you got to make sure the move set and the animation and the
Yep.
dialogue and all the stuff works for someone who's playable now that wasn't before. And if they're already cutting a whole endings out because budget,
Yes.
then one character is what you get. But because this is like a weird 1.22, 1.5 version that's not really a
It's like
remake or
halfway
remaster, I
between a
combine
remake and a
both.
remaster.
It's yeah, because they wanted that point of getting people that like the original to still respect this one. You kind of, it's
Yeah.
weird. Like, should you change that? Should you leave it the same?
I think that the
I
main
totally
point
understand
for
that.
changing it is that I think legitimately playing as Nier in this section again doesn't add anything. Because nothing Nier does in this section is different.
Yeah. Hmm.
So I think that's the main kind of failure here is that you don't have that same connection to Kaine as you do with Nier of playing as them. All right, so the major differences here is we learn the tragic backstories behind every single one of the MacGuffin bosses you have to fight.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
like, I don't know about which ones hit you the hardest, but for me, like, I think the one that gut punched me in a way that was just like, man, this is such an awful situation on every side is the wolves.
Dude, this got me when I realized what was happening. It was just like it was the first time in a really long time where I was just watching something happen, and then I just felt that wave of like, you are going to cry now, just
You get that like
like a
sinking
spell that was cast
feeling.
upon me. Yeah,
Oh,
exactly.
because
It was. Oh,
the gist of what happens in Facade in these secondary arcs is you are there for a wedding of the side character that you met that Kaine is involved with in the start of the game, and the king of Facade who you saved earlier on. And this wedding goes horribly wrong because wolves attack and kill the queen, the new queen,
yes.
in this awful scene that is just like very tragic because this character is a mute that, oh, she's so sweet, and then she just gets her throat ripped out and bleeds
It's
out in a
yeah.
massive violent puddle of blood.
But it's Yoko Taro. That's not the lowest it's gonna go.
That's
It
not the
has to
lowest
get
his arc's
worse.
gonna go. So then the king is like, we need to go kill all the wolves. The king's aide comes up and is like, are you sure this is what she would want? She wouldn't want this. And he's like, but I have to. And so the entire group of Facade goes to murderize the wolves because the wolves attacked. That's what happens in Route A. All right, Route B, you learn that the reason the wolves attacked is because 2 idiot guards decided, hey, let's go on a killing spree of wolves on the king's wedding night, because that'll be a good way to have some fun. And it's like their justification is like literally that. They're not trying to protect him. They like hide it in a veil of trying to protect him, but you can tell from the tone of voice and everything, these people are there for just to kill things. And they just kill a whole bunch of wolves in awful ways, like sticking them through the eye with spears and whatnot. It's horrible. And then, like, I got why the wolves were attacking, because they're just defending themselves at this point.
Yeah.
And it's awful.
It's the worst.
And it's so awful, because I think the wolves are close enough to dogs that most people who have had a pet can kind of really connect with that in a way that some of the other issues or other bosses aren't quite as connectable.
They literally, this is the part where they literally do, like, the big leader wolf is like dying, and then they have the apparition of like his old owner in that cutscene, right?
Yep.
Is this the part where they have that?
Yes, it is.
That is when I lost just control.
And then he asks at the end
senses.
if he was a good boy.
I know, it was literally the meme where it's like, oh, was I a good meme? It's like, no, I heard you were the best or whatever. It's like, it's that, but done to the point where it's just the most heartbreaking thing, and it's just like, oh my god, I've never hated the person that I was playing as more in any other game. This sucks, and I love it.
Yeah, that is really just like, it to me got that feeling of loss and like just an awful situation on every end where there is no good outcome in a way that no other game really has to me. Because it's so hard to do that, especially in such a short span of time, where it's in the span of like 3 scenes that they set up this entire conflict and end it. So you have like 3 scenes, it maybe takes like half an hour. And it's so emotionally affecting. And I think like the second, it was definitely P33 and Khalil, it's just a child that lost his mother and has attached himself to this mechanical robot. And they're friends, they're hanging out, and they're talking about going to explore the world, and then you go and murder them because they're standing there.
Mm-hmm. Because they look evil.
Because you wanted a sword. And it's such a bad situation, because like the entire reason you're fighting these two is because of a misunderstanding, to where this brother from the first part of the game thinks that the robot killed his brother, when his brother actually just got killed by like falling debris.
Yeah.
And so he just hyper focuses on killing this robot that didn't do anything. And I think, man, it's such another affecting one, but the wolves to me were really the ones that just kind of broke me.
For sure, yeah. And I think the really, like, again, the miracle here is that these are things that you, as a player, you've already done them before. And all they add is
context,
subtitles and an extra cutscene for context. And it's just like, whatever, like, you had it like, oh, this is cool or whatever the first time, just whatever emotion was there is now just, again, complete miracle, just completely revitalized and twisted and changed to be completely different and even more powerful than it was the first time.
Yep.
It's just insane.
All right, and there is one other bit of like major new content with this remastering. So the whole bit with the postman in the second act and the red bag man in the second act is new.
Yes.
To where you go explore this like mini Metroidvania for a second, and you go walk around this little ship and learn that, oh, there's a murderous little girl and you have to go kill her. And then you all learn the second time around that, oh, that murderous little girl just wanted to befriend the postman, but because she was like already partly insane and broken, she thought the best way to do that was, because she's a shade, to consume people to gain enough power to be out during the day and see the sunset.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just the entire time like, oh, she's awful because she killed all these people, but she's also just a little girl who wants to like this man. It's like, oh no. I think it really shows that Yoko Taro still got it. Is the main thing.
Oh,
like, he's still 100% got the skills to put this new section into the game that fits perfectly. And of course, it's sad because you learn that the side quest characters from the start of the game that were involved in this are now brutally murdered. Oh, it's rough. All right. So then you get to your shrine a second time, and they do the whole boar fight again. And this is, I think, the third time they got me, where they reveal that there's a scene in the ending where you're fighting all these little shades that aren't very difficult, but you gotta kill them to get through the next room, right?
Mm-hmm.
You learn they're a bunch of babies.
They're all babies.
And then their mother comes to protect them and sacrifices herself to become the giant boar.
And that's why it's so hard to kill, because it's almost like people would do anything to protect their relatives that they care a lot about. What? That's crazy. That's almost like what you're doing. That's wild.
Ugh, it's such a great like recontextualization, and then you have the King of Facade comes to save you, and of course dies defending you, and then also kills the mother, and you can't feel good about either thing because they do this great thing during that scene where when you're playing as Kane, you hear both of them. And so you hear the king like lamenting the fact that everyone's dying and that he has to defend you to rescue your sister, and that he's happy he could be of service in the end. And then this mother is just asking like why they're fighting her the entire time, and like why they need to fight, and then she brutally mauls him.
It's horrible. It's just evil.
It's so like wonderfully emotionally affecting and also horrible the entire time, and that's mostly the feeling here. Okay, so we get ending B, which is the main difference here, I believe, is the Emil head crash in the desert, right?
Yes. Yeah.
I don't think this one has like a major change with the Shadow Lord itself in the fight. At least not that I remember. I think you hear the Shadow Lord talking to Yona before you show up, and he's like talking to make it very clear what he feels. But I think at this point you could have gathered that from the cutscene in the first part. You didn't really need to have the subtitles for this.
And they show like a little extra part of them, like really reminding you, like, yeah, this isn't this. These are the guys that you played as at the very beginning. Like, this is because they do the thing with the cookie.
Oh yeah, they do the cookie scene again.
The cookie thing at the beginning. Yeah. The Emil's head thing. This was like, I didn't expect this game to make me feel happy ever. This was like, oh, he's okay. Yes.
He just got imploded halfway across the world.
He just got sent absolutely friggin' flying into some random desert area, right?
I think it's meant to be like the Facade desert. I think the model they use for the desert is just a picture of the desert from Automata. I think that's like the setting they're using here. It's not meant to be Automata. I think it's just that's the desert they're using, unless it is Facade and I'm just missing something. But yeah, he lands in a desert. Then we're going through ending C first. Same thing up until the end, aside from Emil. We get some more bits about his backstory and how he feels about Halua, who was his sister, and all their sad backstory.
Yeah.
And how like this experiment was done where they gathered a bunch of children up and then turned them all into weapons, and oof.
And there's something else, Ryan, that we didn't touch on that we have to now for the ending of this one and what is new.
Yep.
Kane is in an even more interesting situation, as if it couldn't get any more. There's another person's shade. It's not her shade. It's another person's shade that is trying to take over.
Yeah, friendly murder hobo shade named Tyran.
And also, I didn't know about this. He's voiced by the guy who voices Shinji from Evangelion. I didn't know that, because he like said a few things and I was like, what? that's familiar, but you're like screaming, and I don't really know. And then it hit me when it went through the credits, and I was like, oh my god, that's Spike Spencer. That's awesome. Completely different character, and he does a great job because he just is such an asshole. Um, and as if you've been paying attention, I mean, you can kind of tell what's going to happen to someone who is a main-ish character who has a shade trying to take over their body. Is that at some point, it's going to take over their body.
Yeah, and importantly, we did forget this in ending B. Tyran the entire time establishes early on that if Kane ever stops murdering things, he's gonna just take her over and make her murder things. He we do learn a little bit. He kind of calms down during the B route occasionally, not most of the time, but occasionally he goes a little bit less hard on her and just starts to ask her about oh, are you starting to actually think you're good and important, and kind of goading her on, and less of the murder hobo-y thing. But
yeah,
they have an interesting relationship that's really hard to talk about outside of just the game, because it does a great job of tying them together. He's basically just a presence in the boss fights that will add lines about Kane, where she's kind of shouting at him, which is great because you hear her shouting in the rest of the
that's right
the rest of the first run through, but you don't know why she's shouting. And then Nier will occasionally Kane, are you okay? And we learn the second time around she's either yelling at the shades because she can hear them, or yelling at Tyran because he's talking to her. Yeah, it's a very interesting relationship between the two. You want to tell us what happens to get ending C, Brett?
Well, I mean, Kane becomes Shade Kane, so of course you got to kill her, and you fight, and it's sad because it sucks because you're fighting Kane, and it's cool, but also really
importantly,
sad.
Tyran has a change of heart and tells you that the only way to save her, and he legitimately means this, I think is the important thing, is he's actually trying to help you, is to basically kill her and free her. And Tyran himself.
He gives you a choice. Yeah. And the choice is what decides ending C or D. And that choice is, do you kill her, or do you just erase yourself
from existence
completely?
And also your save data.
No one will remember you. Yeah, well, yeah, because it's not just protagonist you. It's you. You delete your everything from the game. So as you can imagine, killing Kane is difficult to watch because, my God, yeah, I guess she's getting put out of her misery, but I mean,
she does sucks. She does say thank you before she dies.
Yes. Yeah.
But it's the classic no good solution dilemma.
Yeah. Exactly.
All right.
And I think that's
it for ending C, basically.
You can just go to ending D immediately.
So ending D changes. You got to make the choice to sacrifice, which tells you it will delete your save data. You have to hit yes 6 times.
Because it's are you sure? Are you sure you're sure?
And the important note here is, in the original version of this game, that was it.
Yeah. There wasn't even a way to get it back.
You were done.
Yeah.
Your save data gone. You can't get it back. You are done with this run of the game, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
So now you choose to save Kane by sacrificing yourself. Everyone in the world forgets about you.
Yeah, they give all the credit to defeating the Shadow Lord to Kane, but she can still just kind of remember that no, someone else was here.
She remembers losing someone is the important note.
Yeah. And then she starts crying.
Yeah, and she starts crying, and then Yona's the part that gets me with this. Because Nier the entire time is trying to save her to get her back, and then when he finally does, Yona can't even remember him. Mm-hmm. I think that's such a powerful storytelling device that is so hard to get right, because it can feel like a cop-out. And I think a few people felt like this was a cop-out in the original Nier. The reason for that is because this isn't the ending.
They just couldn't put the actual ending
because it was too expensive to put the real one in. So this is your 4th out of 5 ending, and it sets up the world state of, you did succeed, but at a really huge cost. You saved the people you care about, so Kane and Emil are alive. Yona's alive. King of Facade got murderized by a boar.
All of humanity's dead.
All of the Shade humanity is going to eventually die. They're not all dead immediately, but you learn that killing the original Shade Nier basically destroys the only chance of stabilizing the like Shade DNA or whatever of all the other Shades. So they don't go insane to the Black Scrawl, which means you have basically doomed both humanity and the replicants.
Yeah.
Because they're all going to eventually die to the Black Scrawl, basically. So yeah, it's a rough ending. And then the little treat with this new version, you start up a game after sacrificing your save file, and something a little different happens.
Yes. Oh, can I say something first? Just a cool little detail. After, because I was this is when I started really paying attention to the credits, because like the other two times I was like, yeah, I got to watch this like a million times, so I'm not gonna. It's like, oh, Spike Spencer's there, but this one I was like, okay, these guys are giving like crazy performances. Like I gotta see if these voice actors are in like any other things, if I'm like recognizing them, the ones that were in Shinji or whatever. And in Ending D, when you delete yourself, neither of the protagonists' voice actors show up in the credits. There's spaces where they're supposed to be, and I remember being like, "Whoa, where is he? Why can't I figure out who's the guy?"
Oh.
And I thought that was so cool, because they didn't have to do that, but like what in what other
so much
anything
attention to
would
detail.
Exactly. Well, what other anything would you ever think like, oh, we got to change the credits for this part? Like, who? It's the credits. Like, you'd be lucky if people even watch them like ever most of the time. But no, they did it anyway. It was just so cool. But yeah. Anyway, and the start of Ending D's playthrough is yeah, begin.
Yep. All right. So Ending E, we start up, and guess what? You're Kane now.
Yes. Yeah. It goes. You go through the little beginning bit of
getting to the area.
Baby Nier. Yeah, you get to the area, and then Kaine wakes up from a nap, and that was all like a dream or something, because she can still just barely remember like something with someone else was there, but she can't quite tell what. And now you do finally play as Kaine.
And she's cool.
Yeah,
she's really cool.
She's awesome. She's really awesome.
She's got slide kicks. Oh, it's great. And she's got the. I love the thing where her magic. She doesn't have magic, but she has the stabby stab moves.
Yes.
That's way to say it. Where she changes kind of her base combos on using the magic button to do cool little finishers, which is a nice difference here. Yeah, you get to finally use her saw blades, which is very fun. I think the main reason you can tell here they didn't extend her to a full playthrough, I think, is it's clear they didn't have much else planned. With her, or built out to where she doesn't have progression. This is like a I think a 2-hour long ending at the longest, if you really take your time. Outside of the airy start, but you get time to run around just kind of in the open world for a little while. You can't go to the towns and whatnot that you could go to as Nier, because it's established in the other bits that kind of is not really welcome. So no going into towns for you. And
then there's also like there's no vice, no meal when you're running around. It's just you. You don't really have any. It does feel like, oh yeah, it's cool to play as Kaine, but it does feel like lonely. This is it's lonely. You don't really have any sort of ranged attacks. These encounters, like, you do actually
feel the phantom pain.
You can't. Oh.
And one of the other things I love here is the loading screens show letters between Kaine and Yona, which is great that they have like a relationship, because Yona doesn't have a brother anymore and doesn't remember having a brother. So that's a great little detail here. This is also where the game kind of starts to connect to Automata. So they added the original Ending E did exist as some weird novelization thing that was only released in Japan. So this ending, it has been a real thing for a long time. It's just now become a like playable thing. So it existed for a while. This one has some new stuff to where you go into the Forest of Myth and are sent to investigate it. You find the villagers dead and machines exiting the tree that look different than the other machines you've seen.
Mm-hmm.
Kane going inside finds little baby 9S and 2B, not actually.
They're just voiced by them.
They're voiced by them, and they kind of look similar to like a child version of the two. But important note here is they're not actually those people. It's just a nod to Automata from what we can tell.
Yeah.
And they're the administrators who are basically testing Kane and whatnot in their mechanized giant fight that's like, apparently it was planned to be like an hour long in that one fight or something. But they were like, it's not very fun. So they cut it down. That
Which
whole
makes
like
sense.
gauntlet section. Yeah, because you are fighting the same enemies in a small room. And then Emil comes back.
I know.
Our
Pop off
boy
for
comes
four-armed Emil.
He's got 4 arms and they just don't address it.
It's just super badass, dude. I don't know. He just comes back.
Great.
Imagine. Oh my god, he just comes out with 4 arms. He's so cool. He's just such a good character.
Yeah, Emil comes back and he's really cool. And then they start entering what looks like a zone from Automata with all the white.
Like even.
Go ahead.
Even I recognized it. It was like, I get it. I understand. Like the entire UI, everything is different. The environment looks like the weird, like digitized.
Importantly,
like,
even when you fight the boss here, their boss health bar is from Automata.
Yeah,
it's not the normal game. So this is kind of directly connecting it with the kind of starting state of Automata, where all the androids going off and whatnot. And so you get some backstory there, and you get this whole bit where Kane and Emil are basically fighting through the built-up weird version of Shadow Lord's castle, and then fights a giant black cube.
Big black cube, yeah.
And then she jumps into cyberspace.
And
then you fight some twins.
And
then you fight Kane's memories.
Yes. Then you fight the big weird like 3-legged lizard giant thing.
It is called Hook. It is one of the murdery shades that you fight, a powered up version of Hook.
You mean Taz's son? Hook? He's gonna beat my ass on Dynamite on Wednesday.
This is why CM Punk is afraid of Hook, because he'll turn into this.
Yeah, he can see him as a shade because he has Shinji Ikari in his head talking to him all the time.
I mean, hey, if you're listening to a podcast about Nier, you're probably gonna like wrestling.
Yeah.
Go listen to the WrestleCast. All right.
You should.
So Kane is getting her butt beat and is not doing so well.
Yeah.
Is about to get murderized, and Grimoire Weiss manifests out of the ether.
This was number 3 for me. This was like, and it was so weird because it was a completely different emotion. And I was like, okay, like something cool is gonna happen to get her back or whatever. Because I mean, I don't know. Maybe that'll happen. Maybe she'll just like die or something, and this is their end will be in like a cutscene or something. But seeing like he does the thing that like all the characters do when they come back when you think they're dead, and he has like some line or something, and he like saves you. And I actually like, I don't know. I don't think I've ever felt actually genuine joy from seeing a video game character just be back for a little bit, like just come back from the dead than I have for Vice. Because you feel it when he's gone. Like there's no one being there's no one being a little asshole all the time. There's no one being super snarky and just like insulting everything. Like you miss out on his voice. It's so unforgettable. And it's just fine. Like having it back is just like, it's pure relief. It's just pure therapy at that point. Like all these horrible things have happened. All my friends are gone. Emil's back and it was cool, I guess. But now I'm dead again and I'm sad. The friggin' book coming back made me cry again because I was like, yes! Oh my god!
Dude,
and then I had to fight through my tears for the rest of the fight with him.
I love that they establish a book as one of the major, most important characters in this that gets us so emotional when a book shows up. Because it's so well done. And importantly, like we're talking about Grimoire Weiss as he's a snarky bastard, which he is. But he's also very genuine at times and like legitimately talks about how he cares about these characters despite being a book.
Despite being a book and not remembering everything, even though he should, because he's a book that's literally written about all the things that are happening, and he's
Yep.
just like, "Oh, that's pretty crazy, I guess."
Yeah, it's great, and it's also the concept of like this isn't necessarily the Grimoire Weiss that died. This is like the memory of Grimoire Weiss turned into a real thing again, which makes sense because like this whole bit is the construct that created these things to begin with, and so they're brought back in this like archival construct of this tree in the village is like literally an archive of everything ever done and will be done.
Yeah.
Some crazy containment unit that just kind of memorizes literally everything that ever happens and then reconstructs it. So we get Grimoire Weiss back, and it's super emotional, and I love their opening kind of lines to each other where they reestablish the relationship of like, oh, Grimoire Weiss calls her a hussy and whatnot, but they actually really care about each other because he's like, well, let's get out of this now. It's the kind of thing where these characters aren't ever going to be the kind that are like encouraging each other openly, but they are the kind that will make sure that the other person is succeeding and whatnot, which is great.
For sure, yeah.
It's a hard relationship to kind of get across in a way that doesn't feel forced. And I think they do a great job with it. And then you win, and then you manage to manifest a giant flower.
Yes, you manifest a giant of the very, very, very rare for a Yoko Taro game, but a friendly giant white flower.
Yep.
For once. And in the middle of it, you get your wish granted, I guess, that after all the things that have happened, after literally like 10 years of the game being out and this ending only existing in writing, you finally get the mostly, I guess, good until you think about it too hard ending of
the good for the
little
moment
boy
ending.
Nier. Yeah, good, just good for the
these
just
characters.
let me, yeah, just let me think that it's good for now ending until then I'd like wake up the next morning and realize, oh no. Yeah, little boy Nier is back, and they're just doing what normal Japanese media does, and they're just chilling naked in the middle of the flower, and it's very like, oh, finally, honestly, everyone else can be dead. I don't care. Kane and Nier are back, and it's fine. So I choose not to think about it more. This is fine.
Yeah, this is fine. Don't worry. Just wait until you play Automata. So, yeah, you get Nier back, and you have your happy ending for this game of our four protagonists are actually together and semi-alive.
Yeah.
And able to live out the rest of their replicant lives in relative peace. Of course, with the crushing knowledge that humanity is going to die out.
Of course, yeah.
Because you killed Nier. So it's such an interesting ending that has a lot to think about, but it gives you the good bits where it can. And I think that's really, really great for this kind of ending to have. You go through this whole journey of pain and suffering, and you finally get something at the end that's like, okay, we're at a point where these characters at the very least have some peace, which I think is great.
You knew that you weren't going to get something like, oh, it reversed everything and all the people are back. Like, no, this is not that kind of schmutzy kind of like story. And even the characters, I feel like know that. I feel like the characters, the whole time that I was playing, the characters were well written and characterized enough where like I could kind of like imagine like what they like just think like. And this is probably for Kaine. This is probably the best possible thing that could have happened. And also for Nier 2, because now he's back and he can be with the Yona if he wanted.
Yep, it's just a nice bow tie on this package that lets you really stew in the fact that there's a ton of misery still happening and these characters still lost everything, right? Like that's the important thing is as you said, they don't undo any of the loss that happened.
Yeah.
Aside from Nier himself dying, but they're all here at the end. It's like, was it worth it at the end? Probably not. From the player perspective.
Yeah.
But from their perspectives, probably. Because like they made it through. And of course none of them know that they've doomed humanity.
Oh yeah, of course.
Except maybe Emil. Maybe Emil knows. The rest of them, although I think technically Emil is still a human. He's the only actual human.
Okay.
Because he's not a replicant.
I'm not going to contest you because I don't. He's an experiment. He might not be. I don't know if he's entirely
He's
human
maybe
in the
not
first
human
place.
anymore, but
Yeah,
because
he's a
I do believe we
skeleton
learned that
man.
he's just like a stolen child
Mm-hmm.
until he was turned into the monster. Um, so yeah, it's real suffering heavy and crazy game. But yeah, I think this is one of those few games that's like easy to wholeheartedly recommend, with a couple of
Yeah, for sure.
caveats at the end of there are going to be types of people that cannot get through this game for different reasons of like if you can't handle the amount of just suffering this game throws at you, like if you're the kind of person that can't make it through Last of Us, you may not be able to make it through this. Despite the like crazy different aesthetics and like styles, it's a similar level of oh no the entire time.
Yeah.
So I think that's a good thing to know going in is like you're not going to get the happy ending. And it's also the thing where like the gameplay wears pretty thin on the third and fourth
After a little
runs.
bit.
I think the first two runs I was having fun the entire time, but the third and fourth, because those two don't add anything different during the gameplay sections, aside from like a little bit at the start and a little bit at the end, and it really is just like running through the game again. Those ones are the ones that really got me. I was like, okay, this feels unnecessary to a big degree. But yeah, I still think this wholly worthwhile experience.
For sure, yeah.
Especially, I honestly think people that have not played Automata might enjoy this game more. Because I think
it makes sense because it came out first, technically.
In a weird way.
Yeah.
Because Automata fixes almost all of my problems with this game, which is really nice when I'm playing Automata, but knowing what Automata looks like and plays like, replaying or playing this for the first time after that is a little bit harder. To where you have to.
That makes sense.
You lose out on some of the progression, and like Platinum Games made the combat in Automata, so of course it's really good the entire time.
Yeah.
But it's still definitely a worthwhile game. I don't know if it'll be on my GOTY list. I think for you, Brett, it probably is.
This is I've played a couple other things that I really like this year so far. This has rocketed up to like just straight up one of the best games that I've ever played. I mean, like this
Yeah.
is it's so weird because it's very easy to just be like, yeah, you should like play this if you like this, but at the same time, it's like it's really hard to recommend. Like, my mom keeps texting me about like certain games, like, oh, what is Dark Souls and stuff, and I'll like play that with her. I don't know if I want to play. I don't. Well, first of all, I don't know if I want to play this game all over again anyway. But I don't know if I would. This would be a game that I would play in front of my mom for sure.
Yeah.
But I'm in a different situation than you because I haven't played Automata yet. I definitely want to. I kind of always have wanted to, but now I definitely want to even more. I just need to get through other things and be in the right mood for it. And I also like when this came out, this had been the only game in a while that I had pre-ordered because it was just like, I mean, the original one was out already, and I'm going to be honest, even if they didn't fix up the gameplay, which they heavily advertised as doing, that I would probably still like it anyway. Um, so I pre-ordered it and pretty much just like finished it in the next like 3 or 4 days that it came out. Like I put off doing work to finish this game because I was so into it at the time, and it was at a semi lax part in the last semester there, and so I didn't really feel too much of the fatigue of doing the same parts over and over again because I think just everything was for me in such a short span of time because I was so sucked into it that I just kind of was like I didn't feel like, oh, well, now I got up and like a few days later I came back and now I'm in the same spot that I was like last time, even though it's a different run through. Like, come on. I didn't really get any of that feeling. But at the same time, I'm not gonna pretend that doesn't exist because they do make you go through some parts of the game almost 5 times.
Yeah,
So I
significant parts of the
totally
game too, where it's
yeah.
like you are doing the same thing for hours repeatedly.
Yeah.
You do have bits to drag you along in the middle that are like, okay, these are new little bits of things and information that's useful. You might find some stuff you missed. But I do think the gameplay, especially like if Nier had a more detailed move set or maybe some kind of options for combat, I think it would have done a lot to allow you to do like different builds and whatnot. But I that's not really a thing that's focused on in the game, which is fine because the combat that is here is really good. Like this has a really really good, relatively simple action combat system, and the magic is super satisfying to use.
Oh yeah, those magic attacks are really fun.
Yeah. So I definitely think there's a lot of leeway with that.
Yeah, I think from a writing standpoint, I don't think like I think this might be like just a perfect game in my opinion. Like there are little nitpicks and things, and I definitely to a degree agree with you. Like I wish Nier had a reaction to realizing the things that he just did, or realizing that the whole shades and people situation. But I think for me at least, I didn't lose anything with that because there's so many other things that are so detailed, and so many other things about Nier that are so detailed. Um, that I didn't like. Yeah, the gameplay gets old at certain points, and yeah, it could be like have things like added or whatever. Like they could add more different move sets for the different kinds of spears and swords and stuff. But I like while that stuff can be added and changed, I don't think there's anything that would be possible to add or change to the story. Like it's just it's the closest thing that I've played in a while to just being almost untouchable in terms of how good it is in release state.
Yeah, I definitely agree. But hey, if you want more Nier story, you can always go play the mobile game or watch a stage play, which are all canon.
The Final Fantasy 14 raid. Don't forget.
Look, it's not nearly as important as they make it seem.
It's not nearly as.
It's important. Very, very fun, but it is not nearly as important as they made it seem.
Alex Labella isn't here. I have to cover for him.
Yep. So that's a great way to find more about this world. Go watch the stage plays on YouTube. But in serious note, absolutely play Automata. I think I would agree with you that this is a near perfect story if I had not played Automata. Because Automata will raise the bar, which is why I'm very excited for when you play it, Brett, because I think Automata doesn't have the little issues because they had the time and the budget to not have those. Which it makes a big difference, but not if it's the first time playing it, right? So if I had played through Replicant before playing Automata, I don't think I would have had the same problems. Whereas having played Automata, I can see like the tiny little things they improved in Automata that aren't improved here. To where like I'm not gonna fault the Replicant for not having those. I'll fault the remake a little bit for not fixing them.
Yeah, a little bit.
But Replicant's storytelling especially is wonderful the entire way through. And just really, really solid, which is rare to get a game that has like solid storytelling the entire time.
And with really risky stuff too. Like no other game except for whatever other Nier things the mobile game Automata are, no other game is about the subject matter that Nier is, like to the degree that Nier is, and does it successfully. It's just such a weird, like if you went up to a person on the street and started explaining to them what the story of Nier was after like getting to the point of them realizing that you're telling the story about something, I think they would still think that you're like a crazy homeless person on crack
absolutely.
or something, because it's just it's bonkers. I don't know whether to think that Yoko Taro is like a crazy person and that he's like evil and just wants people to feel bad, or that he's just like a crazy person and that he like something in his life has had to like give him the ability to write things that feel so real and emotional. Like he must have had to at least like mentally have gone through some stuff, because my God, especially like and this is more also on in the hands of the translating and localization team, especially the written stuff for Kaine's story is like the most like gut wrenching stuff. The way that it's written, and I think the choice to have it be written I wonder if that like originated from the original situation being that like, oh, we might not have enough budget to make another cutscene.
I mean, I
Let's
wouldn't
make it a
have it any
visual
other
novel
way,
instead.
right? Because
I
like
wouldn't, yeah.
it's so much doing those in a regular. I think the only thing that maybe could have added to it is narration, but even then, like it's totally not necessary. Um, and I really think like having any visual representation for this takes away the player's ability to visualize themselves, which is what's so powerful about like reading a book that can be so emotionally affecting, is because like you can visualize the characters in your own head and be like, okay, this situation is as bad as I imagine it to be.
Yeah, exactly.
It's such a great way of telling a story.
No visual representation like of that is ever gonna be, you know, better or even as good as what like you think of in your head. It's kind of like that same thing as how like you shouldn't show the monster in like your horror thing immediately because like for a while you have that buildup of like just seeing parts of it or just only getting like the sound that it makes or something. Whatever your brain thinks of is gonna be way scarier than what like the costume looks like, and it's just a guy in like a rubber suit or something. It's definitely a similar thing like that. And so I'm glad that those are like that. I'm glad that the weird little quirky gameplay changes are the way that they are, where the game will just
and hey,
decide to
you got
become
more
a
of them
mature
waiting for you in
media.
Automata, Brett.
Yeah, I know. I did, and I'm pretty sure I said this before. I have played the opening tutorial mission before, and it just like switches between just straight up like
Yep.
bullet hell to the action RPG to like other things. It's just like every 5 minutes is something else, and it's just I am excited.
Yeah, it's I just every time I play a Yoko Taro game, it feels so unique compared to everything else. And I think that's really this is what we often don't talk about on the Gamescast, because like it's hard to talk about games that feel like this without having everyone who's played them or everyone having played them, because we can't talk about what's unique about Nier without spoiling it, right? And half of the fun is getting that sense of like all the different things this game does through the game without having it spoiled.
You can't
for you.
talk about it otherwise.
Yeah, which is why like we did the non-spoiler thing this time, so we can try to sell people on it beforehand. But yeah, I really think like I would love to see what Wyatt thinks.
Oh my god, you would be hard pressed to even get him to play the game at all.
Oh, absolutely. But it's because what I play games for is to see these kind of unique experiences and do these things that play these things that other games aren't offering, or these new ideas. It's why I love going back to like the GameCube and PS2 era and playing the weird RPGs like Bait and Kaitos, where it's all cards, or Lost Kingdom, where From Software had you throw out card battle monsters on the field that would then run around ARPG style. It's the kind of thing where like these ideas have often just gotten lost in modern gaming because of concerns about risk and budget and is it possible to do. And sometimes Nier shows you that you don't need the insane budget. You can just do a text adventure, and that's going to be unique and different. You can do like there's a bit in the Forest of Myth section where you're just going into like a man's mind prison.
Yeah.
And then trying to rescue him by running through in classic like picking which way to run style. And it's such a unique
choose your own
thing.
adventure,
Yeah. It's the kind of thing where you just don't see this very often, especially in the same game. Like, look, Brett, this is also why you got to play Yakuza. It's such
this is gonna turn into Brett. This is also why you have to play Final Fantasy 14, isn't it? I could feel it.
Well, 14
feel the vibes coming.
14 does similar things, but in 14 it's more expected because it's an MMO and they have to. Right? Yeah. Whereas like I think this is the selling point of games like Nier and Yakuza, where you have so many different gameplay systems and styles and meshing tones that somehow manage to perfectly come together. And like mesh the moments of comedy in Nier and with the moments of like sadness and sorrow, and really feel like a cohesive whole that isn't missing any one part. It's just really, really important to be able to have a game that has different things happening tonally.
Yeah. It makes it feel more real, because like, you know, like even the most like dour people in real life like aren't super sad all the time. Like you can make you have friends that make you smile or something. You're like something if you're always happy all the time, and something is bad that's going to happen or whatever. So if Nier was really just like the joke is that it's sad all the time, but if it actually was sad all the time, then you wouldn't really get like
you wouldn't care.
Okay, exactly, you wouldn't care. You wouldn't get the this sucks. okay, and we're gonna backtrack a little bit, and then this sucks even more,
And Brett,
and then
you
we're gonna
just
backtrack.
perfectly described my problem with The Last of Us Part 2.
Yeah, because that's pretty much all I've heard from. And I'm gonna be honest with you, I haven't heard like any of like the people on like YouTube or viewers or friends. Like I haven't heard anyone who's really enjoyed that game like a lot. They all pretty much have that problem that I've constantly heard over and over again. Is that it's just like, yeah, you feel pretty bad, huh? Yeah, that dog had a name. Don't you feel bad for having to kill it, even though you didn't have a choice and you had to, otherwise it would kill you? Huh? Yeah, it's pretty. That sucks, doesn't it? It's just
Yeah.
like, oh god, I'm glad I didn't play it
It's
because
like
it just doesn't.
it's a great game, but it doesn't have the nuance, which is so weird to say. That Naughty Dog does not have the nuance that Nier does.
Oh god.
Look, that after saying that statement, I can just feel why it wanted to hit me over the head with a baseball bat.
Exactly.
But yeah, that's really what it comes down to. Is like this is a type of game that you can really only experience from in this moment, right? Like this is the only game that will offer this experience. Even Automata is a different beast, right? It's a completely different type of storytelling. It's still great, and you're gonna like it if you like this, but it's a different thing, which keeps it fresh. So
yeah, totally.
All right, and with that, I think we've mostly done our talk through of Nier Replicant. Any
Pretty
closing
much, yeah.
statements, Brett?
I mean this game is like, it's all the things that I like from indie games, like the experimentation and the super weird stuff, and the just kind of like confidence at doing that with the budget and execution of a AAA game. And that like never ever happens, and I want more of it. And I really, with the place that we are now, with AAA games kind of becoming very samey all the time. A lot of action RPGs feel the same, aside from a few systems. A lot of shooters feel the same, aside from a few systems. Sports games are. I'm not even going to start.
A nightmare.
Like we're getting into a point of stagnation where I think now it's time. And you see like even Microsoft and Sony are picking up these indie companies, and maybe not like sucking them in forever, but like just like giving them like budget and support. Like, hey, make Sable, make Solar Ash Kingdom, make whatever game that you want to make. We'll give you as much support as we can give for something that we think that you can make. I think with both of those things happening, I think we're gonna hopefully end up seeing more games that are like this from the indie scene that's kind of starting to creep into the AAA area.
That's what I really want. I want to see someone have an indie idea on a AAA budget.
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
So rare.
Because it'll feel like this.
Yep. And I honestly think like it's a thing that especially American development has stagnated like that.
God, yeah.
Japan at least often has studios like the RGD, which is Yakuza, and Square Enix tends to try new things every time. Like no Final Fantasy game has been the same as the last Final Fantasy game, right?
Yeah.
And it's such a even if there are failures like 13 and in some people's mind 15, you do get that wholly unique experience every time you play one where you can find things to love. And even if the whole experience isn't great, you at least have an incentive to go play it because it's different, right?
Yeah.
You'll get a unique experience, and it's so rare to find that in American studios now because of like the stagnating AAA industry. So I'm really hoping we get to see some more Western crazy game ideas. Like, man, I hope Ubisoft does not take the wrong thing from Watch Dogs Legion failing in some faction of like, it wasn't the trying a crazy thing that failed, it was not committing to it that was the problem. So
and from what I hear of Wyatt playing Phoenix Immortals Horizon, it would be nice to have more games like that.
I mean, look, Phoenix Rising, I think, is a game that's just, it's baseline fun. It's the kind of game where you play it to relax.
Well, I mean, from Ubisoft.
Absolutely.
That's an improvement.
That's
to
the big
Ubisoft.
one. Ubisoft needs to throw some new ideas out there, and Phoenix Rising is at least a new idea. And hey, it's a fun game. So with that, on talking about Immortals Phoenix Rising, we're going to end this Nier Replicant episode of the Games Club.
Of course, because how else could we do it?
Check out the Gamescast every Tuesday, 7 a.m. Eastern, or live Sunday nights on Twitch. Good evening, good morning, goodbye, everybody, and we hope you have a good day while we sit here for 30 seconds while the outro music plays.
Yep. Ugh. That was good.
And Kane, favorite character.
Oh, of course. Yeah. Absolutely. I didn't think she was going to be at the start, but by the end, there's no question.
Shit, Square Enix.